December 7th, 1941, 7:55 a.m., a quiet, cloudless morning in Hawaii. Two young pilots, Second Lieutenants Kenneth M. Taylor and George Welch, are dead asleep in their quarters in Honolulu after an all-night party that lasted until dawn. Their heads pound, their mouths taste like regret. The world spins even with their eyes closed. They'd been celebrating at the officers' club, drinking, laughing, dancing until the sun threatened to rise. Now they're paying the price, deep in the kind of sleep that only comes after too much whiskey and too little sense. Then, without warning, an air raid siren tears through their hangovers like a knife through silk. The sound is piercing, impossible to ignore, drilling straight into their alcohol-soaked brains. Still groggy, still half-drunk, they stumble out of bed, disoriented and confused. Taylor rubs his eyes, trying to make sense of what's happening. Welch staggers to the window, squinting against the bright Hawaiian sun that feels like needles in his skull. They look outside, expecting to see nothing. Just another drill. Just another inconvenient training exercise that some sadistic commanding officer scheduled for a Sunday morning when everyone's trying to sleep off Saturday night. But those hopes evaporate the moment they hear it. The distant echoes of explosions, the rattle of machine gun fire, the roar of aircraft engines flying impossibly low. The sounds are wrong, too loud, too real, too many. This isn't a drill. Taylor's blood runs cold. Welch's hands start shaking, and it's not from the hangover anymore. They begin to understand what's happening, and adrenaline floods their systems, instantly compensating for 2 measly hours of sleep and a dangerous amount of alcohol still in their bloodstreams. Taylor grabs the phone and frantically dials the base, trying to get instructions, trying to get orders. Trying to get someone, anyone, to tell him what the hell is going on. The phone rings and rings and rings. Nobody answers. The base is under attack and everyone who should be answering phones is either dead, dying, or running for their lives. Think, Taylor tells himself. Think through the fog, through the panic, through the pounding in your head. Then it hits him. There should be some planes at Halewa, a small auxiliary training airstrip on the north shore of Oahu. Not many, but some. Maybe they're still intact. Maybe they haven't been destroyed yet. His fingers fumble with the phone as he calls Halewa directly. It rings once, twice. He's about to give up when miraculously, impossibly, someone answers. Taylor doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He barks orders. Get 2 P-40 Warhawks ready. Fuel them, arm them. Do it now. Do it fast. We're coming. The voice on the other end stammers something about authorization. But Taylor doesn't care. He slams the phone down, grabs Welch, and they run. They're still wearing their tuxedo pants from last night's party. No time to change. No time to think. They sprint to Taylor's car, a civilian Buick that's about to become the most important vehicle in the Pacific theater of war. Welch jumps behind the wheel because Taylor's hands are still shaking. The engine roars to life, and they peel out of the parking lot, heading toward Halewa. 10 miles of winding Hawaiian roads between them and those planes. 10 miles that might as well be 1,000. As they drive, the reality of what's happening becomes horrifyingly clear. Smoke rises above Pearl Harbor like a funeral pyre. Black columns reaching toward the sky, blotting out the sun. The explosions are constant now, a rolling thunder that never stops. Japanese planes fill the air, their red circle insignias clearly visible as they dive and strafe and bomb everything in sight. The rising sun, painted on their wings, looks like drops of blood against the metal. Then the nightmare gets worse. Enemy aircraft spot their car, a civilian vehicle racing down a military road. Easy target. The planes dive, machine guns blazing. Bullets kick up dirt on the road ahead of them, behind them, all around them. Welch doesn't slow down. He doesn't even flinch. His foot stays pressed to the floor, the accelerator buried, the engine screaming. Taylor grips the dashboard, watching tracers fly past their windows, watching the earth explode around them, watching death miss them by inches. The tires squeal as they take corners too fast. The car fishtails on loose gravel, but Welch doesn't let up, not for a second. They reach Halewa, and to their absolute shock, it's untouched. The Japanese haven't found it yet. The small auxiliary strip has been overlooked in the chaos, a tiny miracle in a day of disasters. The two P-40 Warhawks sit on the tarmac, waiting. Beautiful, deadly, ready. Taylor and Welch don't hesitate. They leap from the car before it's fully stopped and sprint toward their aircraft. Their heads still pound, their hands still shake. But none of that matters anymore. The adrenaline has burned away the hangover, replaced it with something primal and pure. Rage, determination, the absolute need to fight back. As they climb into their cockpits, still wearing those ridiculous tuxedo pants, the ground crew chiefs run up, yelling at them to disperse the aircraft, to spread them out, to make them harder targets. Welch looks down at them, grins despite everything, and shouts back the words that would become legendary. Yes, to hell with it. The planes are fully fueled, thank God. But they're only loaded with .30 caliber ammunition. Not the 50s they'd prefer, not the heavy guns, but it'll have to do. Because they're not waiting, not for orders, not for permission, not for backup. Without wasting another second, they fire up their engines. The Allison V-1710s roar to life. 1,200 horsepower of American engineering, ready to prove that yesterday's party boys are today's warriors. They taxi, they accelerate, they lift off. 2 pilots, 2 planes. Flying toward Pearl Harbor, toward the smoke and fire and death, without thinking about the danger, without calculating the odds, without considering for 1 second that they might not come back. Within minutes, they spot them. 12 Japanese Aichi D-3A Val dive bombers circling over American installations like vultures over a corpse, taking their time, picking their targets, bombing at will. 12 against 2, 6-1 odds. Any sane pilot would call for backup, would wait for support, would try to even the odds somehow. But Taylor and Welch aren't thinking about odds. They're thinking about revenge. They engage without hesitation, diving straight into the enemy formation. The Japanese don't see them coming. They're too busy shooting at targets on the ground, too focused on their bombing runs, too confident in their surprise attack. It's a fatal mistake. Taylor and Welch approach from behind, undetected, predators stalking distracted prey. They close to killing range. They steady their aim. They squeeze their triggers. The .30 caliber guns chatter, sending streams of lead into the enemy formation. 2 Japanese bombers burst into flames immediately, their fuel tanks igniting, their wings crumpling, their pilots dying before they even know they're under attack. The formation scatters like startled birds. Chaos erupts in the sky. Japanese pilots break in all directions, abandoning their attack runs, trying to evade, trying to survive. Taylor and Welch separate, each hunting different targets, turning the sky into their personal shooting gallery. The tail gunner of the bomber flying ahead of Welch opens fire, tracers reaching back toward the P-40. Welch breaks off momentarily, evading, but not before taking a few hits. His plane shudders, metal tears, but it still flies. That's all that matters. In the other Warhawk, Taylor empties his ammunition into his target, watching it smoke and burn, but then his guns go silent, empty, out of ammunition already. He breaks off, frustrated, angry, still wanting to fight but with nothing left to fight with. He makes a decision. He'll land at Wheeler Field, his home base, reload and get back in the air. As he approaches Wheeler, his heart sinks. The destruction is total. The airfield has been devastated. Rows of aircraft burning like candles. Hangars collapsed into rubble, bomb craters everywhere, bodies scattered across the tarmac. This is what hell looks like. He lands anyway, touching down in the middle of a nightmare. And there, to his surprise, is Welch already on the ground, already refueling with the help of brave ground crew members who've stayed at their posts despite the bombs, despite the bullets, despite the very real possibility that they might die at any second. Welch's plane is damaged. Holes punch through the fuselage, but it's still flyable. That's all they need. The battle continues, raging across the island. Explosions, gunfire, screaming. But then, incredibly, several officers emerge from the ruins and start running toward them, waving their arms, shouting. Taylor and Welch think they're coming to congratulate them, to thank them for their initiative. Instead, the officers start yelling at them to stand down immediately. They're reprimanding Taylor and Welch for attacking without orders, for taking off without authorization, for violating every protocol in the book. The two pilots stand there, still in their tuxedo pants, still covered in sweat and adrenaline, listening to this bureaucratic nonsense while Pearl Harbor burns around them. The argument is still going when someone spots them. Another formation of Japanese bombers heading straight for Wheeler Field, straight for their position. The officers and mechanics scatter, running for cover, diving into bomb craters, hiding behind anything they can find. But Taylor and Welch, they run toward their planes. They ignore the orders completely. They jump into their cockpits, fire up their engines, and start taxiing back onto the field. Ammunition boxes and tools that were sitting on Taylor's wing tumble off as he accelerates. They don't care. They build up speed, heading straight toward the approaching bombers, bullets exploding in the ground around them, death reaching for them from above. They take off at the exact moment the enemy bombers pass overhead. So close, they can see the pilots' faces. So close, they can see the bombs falling from the open bay doors. The two Warhawks claw for altitude, turning, pursuing, refusing to give up. The bombers disappear into a cloud bank. Taylor follows without hesitation, plunging into the white blindness, flying on instruments and instinct. The cloud blocks his vision for seconds that feel like an eternity. Then he bursts out the other side and finds himself staring at the tail of a Japanese bomber, so close he can almost reach out and touch it. Surprised but not slow, he squeezes the trigger, stitching bullets across the enemy aircraft. But before he can finish the job, another bomber behind him opens fire. His plane shakes violently. A bullet punches through the glass canopy behind his head, missing his skull by inches. He feels something hot slam into his arm and leg. Shrapnel, burning fragments of metal embedding themselves in his flesh. The pain is immediate and intense. Later, he would say with typical pilot understatement, "It didn't matter, it just scared me to death for a minute." Ignoring his wounds, bleeding in his cockpit, Taylor breaks off the pursuit and desperately tries to shake the bomber on his tail. At a much higher altitude, Welch sees that Taylor is in trouble. Without thinking, without hesitating, he dives. Screaming down from above at maximum speed, Welch lines up the bomber that's chasing his friend, steadies his aim, and pulls the trigger. Taylor sees a bright flash behind him, glances over his shoulder, and watches an enemy aircraft, engulfed in flames, spiral out of the sky. Welch bursts through the cloud of smoke, grinning. He just saved Taylor's life. Breathing a sigh of relief, Taylor pushes forward with even more determination, despite his wounds, despite the blood running down his arm, despite the pain. The two pilots separate again, hunting. Taylor chases another bomber and opens fire. Smoke pours from the bullet holes, but before he can finish it off, he spots another formation. Zeros, the dreaded Mitsubishi A6M fighters, the most maneuverable aircraft in the Pacific. And they're closing fast, but that's not what worries him. What worries him is that he sees Welch pursuing a lone Zero, completely unaware that a whole formation is about to jump him. Concerned that his friend is about to be caught by surprise, Taylor abandons his damaged bomber and turns toward the approaching enemy fighters, leaving his kill to its own fate. He's outnumbered, outgunned, wounded and low on ammunition, but his friend needs help. That's all that matters. Fortunately, before a fight can begin, the formation makes a turn and circles around the airfield. Welch, meanwhile, shoots down the lone Zero he was chasing. Another kill. Another enemy that won't be bombing American positions. They returned to Halewa, both aircraft severely damaged, shot full of holes, trailing smoke, but still flying. Both pilots have survived, despite being outnumbered, despite being hungover, despite wearing tuxedo pants into combat. Welch finishes the day with 4 confirmed victories. Taylor has 2 confirmed kills and 2 probables. After the war, Japanese reports and interviews with the pilots who participated in the attack indicated that the actions of Welch and Taylor probably prevented an attack on Halewa and saved lives and equipment from an even more brutal assault. Incredibly exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, the 2 pilots drive back to their quarters in that same Buick. They're stopped by their squadron commander, who's racing in the opposite direction to find out what happened to the planes at Halewa. He runs up to their car and shouts, "What are you doing? We're at war! Get to Halewa!" The 2 men, still in their tuxedo pants, still covered in blood and sweat and glory, tell their shocked commander about the events of the day and assure him that the planes are safe. Both pilots received the Distinguished Service Cross for their heroic actions. Lieutenant Welch was also nominated for the Medal of Honor, but it was denied because he flew without orders. The bureaucracy that almost stopped them from fighting also prevented them from receiving the nation's highest honor for doing exactly what needed to be done. Lieutenant Taylor was also awarded the Purple Heart for wounds received in battle, wounds he'd sustained while bleeding in his cockpit, refusing to quit, refusing to land, refusing to stop fighting until the enemy was gone. Taylor survived the war and retired from the Air Force in 1971 with the rank of Brigadier General. He led a quiet family life until his death in 2006, never bragging about what he did that day, never seeking glory, just another American who did his duty when it counted most. George Welch also survived World War II and became an instructor in the Korean War. Significantly, sometimes during his teaching assignments, according to reports, he shot down several enemy MiG-15s, directly violating orders not to engage in combat. The decorations for his victories were officially given to his students. Once a rebel, always a rebel. Yes, to hell with it. Indeed. On October 12, 1954, Welch's aircraft, an F-100 Super Sabre, broke apart from a 7G overload while pulling out of a dive at Mach 155. He was test flying the newest, fastest fighter America had ever built, pushing it to its limits, doing what he'd always done, flying faster and harder than anyone thought possible. George Welch is buried in Arlington National Cemetery among the heroes where he belongs. The story of Kenneth Taylor and George Welch is a reminder that heroes don't always look the part. Sometimes they're wearing tuxedo pants. Sometimes they're hungover. Sometimes they're disobeying direct orders. Sometimes they're just 2 young men who refuse to let bureaucracy, hangovers, or overwhelming odds stop them from doing what was right. On December 7, 1941, while Pearl Harbor burned and America reeled from the worst surprise attack in its history, 2 pilots who should have been too drunk, too tired, and too unprepared became legends. They proved that courage isn't about being ready. It's about refusing to stay down when the world needs you to stand up. If this story inspired you, if it showed you a side of Pearl Harbor you never knew existed, hit that like button. These men deserve to be remembered. Subscribe to this channel because we're bringing you the stories that history forgot, the heroes who never got their due, the moments that changed the world but somehow got left out of the textbooks. Drop a comment below and tell me what surprised you most. Did you know about Taylor and Welch? Did you know that some of Pearl Harbor's greatest heroes fought in tuxedo pants? Share this video. These men gave everything. The least we can do is make sure their story doesn't die. History isn't just about the battles we remember. It's about the individuals we forget. And Kenneth Taylor and George Welch deserve to be remembered forever. Thank you for watching. And never forget that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who were too stubborn to follow orders and too brave to let a hangover stop them from saving the day.